I was like, well, set up lav mics and all that, but no, we're
No,
good.
that's insane. This is the lead society.
That's much better.
Oh, hello, I didn't see you there. My name is Abe Hunter, and I'm the founder of the Lead Society. And Richard joining us from sunny Florida. How is it in sunny Florida? My co-host.
It's freezing, aka it's in the low 50s.
Oh, boo-hoo. Richard, will you introduce our guest today, the America's first couple of art song?
Yes. No, we're very happy to have the returning guests, Ryan McCullough and Lucy Fitz Gibbon. And I just want to say you guys have the honor of being the Lead Society Roundtable's final guest of 2020.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. That's really nice. And I'm sorry. I mean, on my part, not on Lucy's part.
We're happy to have you. We're actually even happier to see 2020 go. So
yes, us too. We're with you on that. We will see you out the door.
Well, it's not the first time I've been seen out the door.
No,
let's get
your clavichord.
But I was just enchanted when we had you on the show. When Stephanie Blythe brought you along for the ride, and I immediately said to Richard, we need to get them back. And here you are.
Here you are.
Thank you.
And as I've said before, we're always delighted and surprised when people come back on the show.
We didn't scare you away.
We didn't scare you away despite our Halloween lighting and other internet problems.
Yes, yeah, that was exciting.
I mean, the things you tweak along the way, we learn, right?
Yeah, that's exactly.
But no, like it's actually such a pleasure to have you two back, because the little that we learned of you on the show just, made us have even more curiosity. And if just as a launching point, yes, you are the first couple of Art Song, but with the many, like, the multifaceted nature of, like, as artists who we are, Ryan, you not only wizard of the piano, but also, like, you're in sound engineering, music engineering, and I think the last time we had you on Halloween, you were actually just coming from a project. So
exactly.
What would you say, like, what it's the vantage point of having the experience from that, from both sides of the microphone, if you will. Like, what have you learned, and what, especially during this age of the pandemic when we're kind of reliant on microphones these days, like, what would you say is, like, something you've really learned in this time?
Well, my snobometer has become much more tolerant. I think it was much less tolerant come, March 2020, and now December 2020, I will listen to anything and be like, yeah, that's fine. You did a good job. I can hear you. Yeah, I've done a lot of recording this year. I was already doing a lot of recording, and then, in lieu of concerts not really happening, I was doing more audio engineering gigs, and I got to do some really cool stuff. One of which when we last talked, I was recording this Iraqi maqam ensemble, which all instruments I had never recorded before: oud, santur, a Middle Eastern Arabic style vocalist. It was incredible. And I'm not sure I have a particularly good articulated description of what it's like to be on both sides. I don't think it's that different, honestly. I mean, I find myself listening to music in much the same way on a pair of cans, listening to someone as I do sitting at the piano bench. And I'm thinking about all the same things, the sense of depth and space and dynamic range. I think I just hear more of what I am used to hearing. So I'm grateful to be on both sides, but from my point of view, I have trouble hearing much of a difference. I don't feel like I have to put on a different hat. And I think that comes from uh, many times that I've recorded myself and been engineering while playing. And I think maybe having to just be cool and calm and centered and not get too distracted by both streams to sort of conjoin them. I think that has completely colored my view of audio engineering and of recording generally. So perhaps it's an unusual vantage point, but I don't think it necessarily has to be. And I've worked with a bunch of Bard students this semester, where I was, recording with them, playing with them, and also helping them make recordings. And I did see a lot of them have this growth arc where they started out afraid of audio engineering, or of recording, I should say. But because I made them coil cables and set up microphones and kind of be on both sides, by the end, I think their performing in recording actually got better, because it all kind of demystified everything, phantom power and arming tracks and all this stuff that, it seems so foreign. Once you know that it's all there, the practice of recording becomes much more, it's just music making.
Well, maybe it raised the stakes enough where they're like, I don't want to coil another cable. I'm going to get this right the first time.
There's that. That's true.
But I do think that so many of us have anxiety going into a recording, and it's a different kind of anxiety than the anxiety we have performing. I think in both cases, we're always aiming for perfection, but the anxiety of recording and the kind of self-reflection that we have to do as a part of the recording process can be, in some ways, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, it can be in some ways even more painful than
debilitating
than live performance. But as from a teaching perspective, I teach at Cornell University and then also at Bard, and at Cornell all of my students are required to well, now with Zoom it's so easy, I can just press record and I send them their recordings, and they're required to listen to them every week and take notes and send them to me. And I have found, certainly for myself and also with my students, that the more time we spend just kind of getting comfortable with how our instruments interface with recording technology, the easier it is to know how we want to appear and sound on camera and on a recording. And I think that I do hope that one of the benefits that comes out of this incredibly difficult year or years is
knock on wood.
yeah. But certainly for us into the spring, we're still having spring concerts canceled.
Oh yeah.
I really hope that what we emerge with out of this cocooning time of quarantine is just a better understanding of how we want to present ourselves, and a mastery of some of those elements of the audio engineering, the videography. Not that we need to in any way replace the brilliant people who do that professionally, but when we know what works well for our instruments, it helps us to be better advocates for ourselves when we're working with a wonderful professional.
It's just like, you feel the concert hall as being a part of your instrument.
Yes.
Or as a singer, is something pianists don't really think about as much, but what you wear is also part of your instrument, how it interacts with your body and your breathing. For pianists, the pedal, and it's literally a part of our instrument, but it can feel kind of out of body, or how high the lid is, like all these things that are an extension of your music making. A microphone is just an extension of your music making. And there are a million different ways where to put a microphone, just like there are a million different ways to pedal a passage. and they all have consequences, and they're all, you know, benefits and side, you know, negatives to putting something in one place or another. So I think in doing more recording, you just learn to trust what matters and ignore what doesn't matter.
Yeah, it seems like everything you guys are talking about is this, like, it's the collaborative process, and something we don't really think about when performing live is exactly like you said, the space itself is part of the collaboration, the people
And
in
the
the audience are part of the collaboration.
Yeah.
But at that point, you know, translating that to recording, you don't think about what is that person sitting in row J, seat 16 here versus somebody who's sitting like in the balcony or something. Those experiences are ever so slightly different. But when you have a microphone, maybe you're only getting that one perspective. So it's that collaborative effort. And even, you know, like what you were saying, Lucy, with this idea of even just becoming fluent in the process of technology, and even to the point of, you know, wrapping coils, like those are important. You learn to respect the technology, so when you actually approach it, not, like you said, to remove the people who it is their profession, this is what they studied, this is what they do, and they know a great deal about it.
I have no coils here. This is I would be embarrassed. I would be shut down. I would be shut down if you guys could see what's happening down here.
It's not a fire hazard, I promise everybody. No, but it's that idea of being able to walk into a recording studio at your own will and saying, I at least have a good idea of what I'm aiming for. So
yeah, that's an okay cable. I'd say, yeah, that's an okay coil.
Yeah. No, it's a big deal. Like it really bothers some people because, you know, XLR cables are expensive.
Tell me about it.
No, you know, at least $1.25 a foot, and when they break, it's a big deal, especially if it's during a performance and you didn't want that to happen. So some people get very fussy about that.
But Richard, everything you were saying, I think, you know, I try to think about that the same way collaborating with a pianist. And I'm always asking Ryan to explain things to me, you know, why are you using the pedal that way? Because the more that I know, I mean, I'm the world's worst pianist.
It's not true,
but really is true.
Okay.
And she's really quite modest. And we also have the world's most modest soprano on tonight.
But the more that you know how the instrument works, the easier it is to have an idea and ask for something, or to have an informed conversation.
I'm always asking Lucy about her passaggio. I always forget where it is, and what. I mean, Lucy doesn't have a passaggio, which is amazing. But
we can talk about that later.
But no, just like, you know, how does that feel in your voice? You know, we're playing some Brahms, and Brahms is very, very, very thick, and you know, I sometimes am not fully aware of what's going on her end.
Well, it's so easy for us as pianists to it's like, oh, you just get to dig into some Brahms, but his piano was different than ours.
Yes, yeah, straight strung, yeah, cleaner. Yeah, totally. But let's just, you know, milk the cheese while we can.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, if you're not getting those keys like right into the bed of the keyboard, then like, what's the point?
Oh yeah.
But it's more about pedaling.
Yeah, totally. Not letting and Schumann also, you know, it's all in the middle, and
exactly.
You stick the pedal on Clara Schumann as well. It's just it's a hot mess unless you are keeping it sort of transparent.
But that's why it's so important to have those conversations with the singer.
Yes. And they're often afraid to, you know, I find, not with Lucy, but I find when I work with other singers, they can be afraid sometimes to talk about, to get out of their wheelhouse with a pianist, maybe because they're used to working with pianist coaches who tell them what to do. So there's like this built-in power dynamic already. And I don't.
Well, and you think about
make chamber music.
Yeah. And like, you think about just the collaborative effort between like singer pianist, and so much, like, I'm lucky in the sense that like I have my background in violin. So how to translate like hard matter into like sound. And you think about like the somewhat esoteric nature of singing, where it's so intangible, but at the same time, depending on like who your coaches or teachers are, sometimes they resort to like, it's the golden orb, it's the, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then you try to like discuss that with a pianist, and they're like, what the hell is this golden orb you're talking
See, no,
about?
I'm the golden orb kind of person. And I will tell you, one time I had a teacher, had switched teachers, and it just wasn't working. And I just said, can you, it was all physics. And I'm more of I suffer from an imbalance of emotional and intellectual properties, leaning on emotional. And he said, well, what do you want me to say? It smells like roses. I said, exactly.
That works.
All right.
I think about that a lot in teaching because, with my students at Bard, everybody is going into music professionally. They're doing a master's degree in performance. So they've had, already a wonderful background in music. And at Cornell, it can be a kind of mix of things. I've had students go on to graduate programs in voice after finishing at Cornell, but I've also worked with a lot of students who have no interest in pursuing music professionally and might have more of a background in computer science than they do in music. And of course, that has nothing to do with how their instrument functions, but does have a lot to do with maybe how they think about the world. And so for some of those students, it really is like, let's talk about physics. Let's try and understand really what's going on in the body. Because if I give you an image, it doesn't make any sense to you. And I think I'm more of the like beautiful flowers smell a certain way, and the sky is like that particular color of blue, and that is 100% how you sing this phrase. But it's been a really wonderful education for me to learn how to be more specific, and also to think, okay, well, if I were thinking about this from a computer programming standpoint, like how would I program that? Like maybe I can think of.
Do you ever just say 0,
like,
0, 1, 0?
Yes, the binary background of music making.
And they're like, of course. Why didn't you just say 0, 0, 1, 0, 0?
Exactly.
So you guys, as we know this, like you are incredibly lucky to be together. Yes, because like we love people being together. But just the nature of actually, like we're talking about this collaboration, this music making, that you're really able to learn the opposite craft from like your partner. And this is my convenient segue to a recording you guys made together. If I'm correct, Lucy, the info you sent us, that this was a CD you guys released, but it was recorded in 2018, correct?
Yep, in February 2018, and then released this May this year.
Could you set it up for us?
Yeah, sure.
Well, we were approached by the wonderful American composer James Promash, who was a student among other people, of John Harbison's and
George Crumb, and Mario Davidovsky is quite the pedigree.
Wow, yeah.
A really wonderful composer.
Ryan had met Jim at Tanglewood, I guess. Is that correct?
Actually at Cornell. I'd been connected with him. So I met John Harbison when I was at Colburn, and I was playing his second piano sonata, and I played it for Bob Levin, which is who John wrote the sonata for, and I asked if I could get in touch with Mr. Harbison, and Bob Levin gave me his fax number. And this is in 2009, and I, even at that point, I was like, what the hell is a fax?
There's this wonderful thing called email.
Yes. So I sent John Harbison a fax.
Yes.
And then I got a handwritten letter back from him about what days he was available for me to come and play for him at his home in Cambridge.
Uh-huh.
And so I played the sonata for him. And I was told this story later. I showed up. He and his wife, Rosie, took me out to Indian food, which was really sweet. They're really wonderful. And then Rosie went for a walk with the dog, Rudy. And then I played for John, and then Rosie came back, and John made me play the sonata for her again. And as the story goes, she was not very impressed with me at the Indian lunch. And she was like, well, this is going to be bad. So I'm going to take the dog for a walk.
Was it because you didn't like your food spicy?
Well, no, I like my food spicy. I guess I just can't. I made some joke about the Mirabai songs and the dark one with Indian food. I don't know. It was really
How
bad.
dare you?
Too
No.
soon.
But so he made me play the sonata for her, and then she was like, "Oh, you're good."
Can you stay for dinner?
And that's when I first met him, and then he connected me with Jim Promash, and they're very close. And I was co-commissioner of a piano work of Jim's. And so both the second sonata and this piece, Pure Contraption, Absolute Gift, were on the CD. And then we also included one of John's incredible song cycles, Simple Daylight, which was last recorded by Lucy's teacher, Don Upshaw, and Gil Kalish. And then we also included some songs of Jim's. So it's a very personal album.
Yeah,
And
I guess maybe just going on to say that I had the opportunity to also work, both of us had the opportunity to work with John many years later for, in Ryan's case, at Tanglewood, and Jim heard me sing there. And so we had sort of been rotating around each other for a while, and Jim asked us if we would be interested in putting together this album. So it was a real pleasure kind of knitting together those two different voices, which inform each other but are also distinct from each other, and also getting to know more of John's, well, I had done some of John's songs before, but getting to know more of Jim's songs. And the pieces that we recorded, for the most part, all of Jim's songs are premiere recordings.
Wow.
So it was really special to get to know some of those pieces. And I think the one that I linked you to is the last selection on the CD. And this beautiful poem by Kathleen Norris is a sort of ecstatic exploration, fittingly for the holiday, of who Jesus, or what Jesus might be. And I thought it was also fitting to end the CD of these two deeply faithful men, men whose lives have been really informed by their relationship with the church in different ways. John talks about Simple Daylight as functioning a bit like a Bach cantata. And so we hope you enjoy it.
Here we go. Oh,
Stunning.
oh.
D flat major.
Hey,
Just
when
soak
you've
it up.
got all the black notes.
Exactly.
I make the noise when I just that means it's good.
That's your own form of synesthesia.
Yeah.
No, Jim had said, Jim kind of tends to fret a little bit about his work. So I think he really cares about his work and tends to be a little self-conscious about whether it's good enough. And about this piece, he was like, I just feel like it's kind of, like musical theater. And he told us that John Harbison told him, like, you just gotta go for it, man. Like, if you want it, just go for it. You don't want to go halfway. Just, if that's the space you need, then you go there. Otherwise, it won't work. Now, it doesn't really sound like musical theater. But I think, for Jim, it's an important enough message, the text, that it needed to be a very personal language musically, and I think that makes him uncomfortable.
I mean,
Appropriately.
we talk about it so much as artists, like how much in the pursuit of performing with, like, absolute abandon, like how much do you actually, expose to an audience? How much do you actually open up of yourself and let people in? And I mean, even like what you said, it's funny, like the audience, they don't realize this, but much of what we were talking about before the show is this idea of like identity in what we do. Before the show, we were talking about this beautiful instrument you have behind you that you yourself, Ryan, like put a lot of like of your own hard labor into building, and that idea of putting one's identity on your work, whether people see it or not. And just with your stories and like, with the stories of Rosie and seeking her own approval, like I hope that makes the liner notes, like if not for this like initial printing of the album, but like if not for like an extended for the like the ultimate edition
For the vinyl release.
There you go.
I think there's also a self-consciousness in a lot of contemporary music about beauty and about being immediately accessible. And actually, I think the song that's right before this on the album is an atonal song about baseball.
It's literally 12 tone. It's called The Pitcher.
And it's a delightful, hilarious, wonderful little poem and therefore little song. But there's so much, I think, in contemporary music where we're afraid to show that we love something. And both of us do a lot of new work in addition to Brahms, Schubert, the classics. And it's been something I've been thinking about a lot in the last few years, particularly when I perform contemporary music that's joyful. I think it's easier for us to talk about the things that are hard and the things that make us afraid and the things that are dark and awful and wrong with this world. And I am not saying that there are not a lot of those things for us to think about, but it's been interesting to realize over the last, 5 years of my career, how much contemporary music I've sung that is really dark. And as I try to think as a performer, I feel like my job is to make the music that the audience is listening to meaningful on a first listen. Doesn't mean that they have to love the music. It doesn't mean they have to necessarily understand the music in its entirety, but I want to be able to communicate to them with the music. And so I've noticed, a lot of the stuff that I perform, I did do an all Webern Christmas concert last year.
Oh, I mean, that's the holiday music I gravitate toward.
It's very a Webern Christmas, very uplifting.
And actually, it was so incredibly exciting to perform for an audience of people who were really, really, really into Webern. That was an amazing gift. But it's interesting how much we try to shun the stuff that's beautiful or denigrate the stuff that's beautiful. And I hope that as we continue to think about writing music and performing music, we move away from that fear.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not to say it
Yeah.
should all sound beautiful
Well, and-
or easy on a first listen.
And Webern is beautiful, like
Yeah.
really, truly beautiful. I think much of what Lucy's talking about too is just a fear of falling back on instinct and familiar sounds that maybe you've never really thought about much. I think this is just speaking as a composer's point of view. There's a fear of falling back on sounds and tendencies and idioms, musical idioms, which are comforting and warm, like, you know, mac and cheese. You've never really thought about exactly what is in the package of pre-made mac and cheese, and you kind of don't want to know, and you're afraid to present this as
I
like
know there's a deceptive
art.
cadence in there.
So you add, you know, some kale and whatever to make. But I mean, I there's just a lot of self-consciousness. This comes from, you know, certainly after World War II,
Exactly.
this fear of the past somehow damaging your perception of the present, and then using music as a participant in atrocity. It's this thing that we have just not shaken yet, and for good reason, because
Those atrocities are still playing out.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly correct. You think about, I can just talk about toward like American music, like in the United States specifically. You look back at what the post-war musical era was, and even from just like a dramatic point of view, you look at like what was being created in opera. You had these works like The Tenderland, which on the first look, you're like, this is nice. This is like Americana. But then you look deeper into what it's about and you're like, it's actually not that happy of a story. And it's not the same as the Romantic era of like, you know, the Toscas and the Rigolettos and everything, where they were larger than life. So they were noble. They were ennobled by their deeds, while post-war music tends to either embrace those atrocities that you're speaking of, or trying to address the everyday atrocities, I guess you could say, just like the negligence of society of saying like, we're just going to like leave these things and not talk about it. And then those composers were like, no, let's actually talk about these everyday atrocities, like just crime, like on the surface. That I really hope that what you're talking about, what you're searching for, actually comes out a lot more, and especially 2020 being what it is, like you actually hope that there is a little bit more light in compositions and what artists are looking for. And the same with poets, the same with the actual like source material, that they can find a little bit more warmth and light and not have to shy away from it, just because we have an entire musical industry that surrounds around like making you happy and like
kind of its own darkness.
Placating. Yeah, you know, we had one of the things that I did this semester with my students at Cornell was all of the students taking voice lessons, not just my own studio, but the studios of the other faculty. I worked with everyone to put together a recital of Florence Price's music. And as a part of that, I engraved, along with a colleague, 10 of her songs that I received from the University of Arkansas and from manuscripts. And we together recorded the piece that wound up being last on the program, which is this beautiful setting of a poem, Winter Idyll. And the way the poem and the music begins, it just really seems like you're in a dark, desolate, unforgiving place. And one of the things that I found so remarkable about getting to know her music her vocal music in such detail, was that she is such a chameleon of a composer. So you can hear her influences from Tin Pan Alley to playing the organ at the movie theater, to in the way that she handles harmony and structure, to the piano works of Rachmaninoff. I mean, it's all in there. And in this particular song, which I wish we could have shared with you, but it is not hasn't been published yet, and so we can't have it in that sort of archival format for public consumption. Yeah, seriously.
That's right.
That's part of the conversation. It's an amazing song because you start out, the dry-lipped grass curls back and reveals these pitted stones, and the tree in it, with its branches in their new lack, bears its skeletal bones, and it really kind of starts out in a dreary place, but it goes to this promise of human connection and of knowing that somewhere out there is a door that's waiting to welcome you, waiting to open for you. And I do really hope, just as you said, that as we go forward, we find a way to be able to speak to everybody, to be able to be specific enough in our writing and thoughtful enough in our process and inclusive enough in the way that we are not just presenting concerts, but also teaching students and developing audiences, that we get to a place where we all get to share in this art form, which is so amazing and remarkable, but also has many flaws.
Wow. I mean, that's punkt. Great. Wow. So kind of circling back to this idea of collaboration, and really, like, Lucy, you kind of just shed a light on the greater, like, concept of collaboration, like really kind of on like a human basis. As many of us artists have kind of been, had to resort to, is this idea of collaboration from a distance. And with like your capability, like in academia, Ryan, with like, your experience as an engineer, like what would you say is something you've discovered in this kind of like collaboration remotely? And actually, I'll ask the question, like, if you think that kind of collaboration is going to persist even beyond the reintroduction of live performances, or do you feel like it'll just kind of like fall by the wayside since the necessity won't be there as much?
Or at least until the next pandemic.
God. Not too soon.
There we go. Well, I mean, there are different kinds of remote collaboration, of course, different, like literally different mediums.
Mm-hmm.
The remote live collaboration, that is still a problematic thing that I have yet to have a positive experience technologically. And I know there are people playing around with SoundJack, which sometimes works, doesn't always work. It's hard to get set up. And then you're always in fear of losing a connection, and it's rough. Then there's you've recorded something and someone tracks to it, which, as singers have all know this very well, you get tracks from your pianist. Or Lucy and I did this performance of a bunch of Yiddish folk songs by Joel Engel, 2 of which involve violin. So we recorded everything and then sent those 2 to the violinist, and she recorded them. And then the third is click tracking, which is horrifying. It works, it's effective, but one of the things you realize you're missing is
soul.
A scent that, yes, and also your eardrums bleed from. But you take for granted a shared sense, or even just an intuitive internalization of direction in a phrase. Because when you listen to someone, you just like, no, okay, this phrase is going here. When all you have is, you don't know where the direction is. So what I've found in doing stuff like that is that you can have 2 very different opinions about that direction, and it creates its own kind of beautiful collisions, like, wow, I would not have thought to do that, and we're both doing it at once, and okay, but that's interesting. I would never have been able to sound that way collaboratively were we in the same room. because one of us would give to the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would go with you or you would go with me, and we would just do that together. We could not be that independent. But because of this click track and we are thinking separately, you really do get to hear how differently people's ears function, and phrasing heartbeats. Certainly all these things will stick around. And if you record for movies or something, you know all this stuff already. You've been doing it for a long time. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do find sometimes in previous collaborations before the pandemic, especially with me doing a lot of traveling and last year going back and forth between Ithaca and the Hudson Valley, Ryan was kind enough to record some practice tracks so that like while I'm in the car for 3.5 hours, I can memorize something. And so I had done a little bit of playing around with that, but never
To this extent.
Yeah, never to this extent. And actually, so in that Florence Price project, Ryan recorded all of the piano parts for about 40 of her songs. And so the really fascinating thing for me was getting to know 40 songs so that I could talk to Ryan about, I think, this place needs a breath here, or maybe this tempo would work a little bit.
Because I never played it with any singer.
Yeah.
I mean, I read through some of them with
yeah.
Lucy, but we would read through it. That was basically the extent of our collaborative.
And so then from a singing perspective, it then becomes yet another layer that you have to take as wonderful and perfect, and then figure out how to make your line work around that. In the same way that we have those conversations with the score, we see a certain dynamic marking or even a certain pitch written on the page, and we have to figure out, how do I make that pitch, that dynamic marking, that phrase really sound convincing, because that's what the composer wanted. But the experience of working with a click track, I did 10 pieces with the Albany Symphony earlier this summer, and it was very, very difficult. And then one of the other things
there would be some negotiation if you were in person.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd be like, hey, this tempo that you want, no.
Or I need an Agagic accent on this note.
Yeah.
Rehearsal grinds to a halt. Everyone glares at each other,
They're like,
and then you arrive at something, and it works.
But I mean, I've been doing these amazing concerts as a part of their New American Music Festival every year for the past several years, and we premiere a ton of music. Maestro David Allen Miller is brilliant. He brings in amazing young composers. I've just been so privileged to get to work with all of these people over the past few years, but we're always in the same room together. And when you're doing something with a click track that's never been performed before, it's like a lot of times the sound, we were talking earlier about how your sound exists in a space, but the space of MIDI, things can go like infinitely fast because nothing has to move. And so then when you're trying to sing that part with that impossibly fast click track, where somebody's like shouting out rehearsal numbers, oh my gosh, it was just like such a demoralizing experience, because the whole time I was also thinking about how much more fun it would have been to be with the other people in the room, and so I really, really, really disliked doing that.
The problem is it sounded really good.
Yeah.
They came off really well.
The pieces, it was so exciting, and I got to see my friends' faces on, like, oh, there's Bixby, here are these people that I've worked with in the past, and it felt amazing to see them all and to hear it all come together, and just it felt like creating magic or stone soup. And I never really want to do it again, but I was so glad. Of course I would, and I was so grateful that some music got to come out of that emptiness.
And in a way, it's somehow more poignant. Unfortunately, it's like you wish that things would just be that poignant anyway. But because no one has ever actually performed this piece, ever, we've just all kind of put it together, and someone worked on it in Logic or DaVinci or whatever program they're using. And the piece exists kind of all in our collective minds, but not actually as a real event that happened. And there's something meaningful about that, and its powerful ephemerality. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about, like, I think it's what we've all kind of been dealing with in these past 9+ months, is this, like, the lack of spontaneity that we have embraced throughout our entire education and profession, that it's like, oh, we can create something in the moment, but obviously with having to negotiate with technology, it is what it is. Like you said, Ryan, to sum it up, you don't understand what anybody else's perspective is. You're just like, I know what I think of it as, and somehow I contributed toward this larger endeavor, and there it is. That was the moment, and it's cemented in, in digital form. So it'll stay that way until we can actually, like, come together and try to make a living presence out of it.
And a lot of those moments are really beautiful.
Yeah,
and that's
when you
what's
think
kind
about
of
it.
yeah. I mean, and I say unfortunately again, because we don't want these moments to be so meaningful. We would like to all just go back to everything else as normal. Yet some beautiful things have really happened despite all of this. And I've kept bringing out this quote of Luciano Berio, and I can't remember the exact wording, but he says something about how frustrating it was in the 1950s at Darmstadt to feel like he and other composers of his generation had their youth stolen from them by World War II, and how saddening that was. And yet, he says something like, from these privations great culture is created, or something. So, and there was another pandemic 100 years ago, and some amazing music has happened since then. In fact, all of the amazing music that we think of as the 20th century, really. So some great things will come from this, and out of this, and I'm totally confident that it's going to be meaningful in the long run. It just sort of hurts right now.
What do you say to your students who haven't begun maybe working in the real world because they're still studying, and the real world has forever changed? What do you say to them? And are they in the wrong career?
Well, I don't think any of us are in the wrong career, because I think music is, and communicating with other people, that is what makes us human. And it is at least as important today as it was in March. And so that I don't think has changed. But I do think that as educators, we have a real duty to our students to help them come out of this period with skills that they can use to springboard the work that they're doing in the future. And so from my perspective, that really means making sure that the students are conversant in technology. It doesn't necessarily, as we were saying earlier about recording, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be the ones doing the audio engineering, but they have to know the kind of work that goes into it. And for now, they probably also should know how to do the audio engineering, because the fact of the matter is that thanks to actually the work that Ryan had been doing back in 2018 and before with audio engineering, that's a lot of what has allowed us to continue communicating throughout the pandemic. And both of us have needed to learn new skills to be able to continue keeping up with technology, whether from my perspective, because I do a lot of teaching, with singing, you can't really be in the same room. So I'm doing a ton of teaching over Zoom. And so whether it's being conversant with that sort of immediate live music making technology, or with the audio engineering side, which I've also tried to learn a bit of.
This is good.
Does Ryan make you roll the cables after every lesson?
She knows. She
I
knows
do it
the
voluntarily.
way. Over under, baby.
But no matter what aspect of it, we do need to help the students be able to be masters of their own craft. And this
art
is part of the craft now. Yeah. And so actually, this class that I co-teach with Stephanie at Bard, the students had to create their own recitals, which were digitally presented at the end of November. And those projects had a viewership of over 1,000 people, engaging with them. And actually, I mean, that's far more than would have come to see them in person. And so I do hope that what they get out of this is that the internet can be yet another, and digital performance can be a tool that they can use to create, to build communities, to create an audience, to really deliver a finely tuned message, and that this doesn't have to be something that they're afraid of. And a big part of what both of us have been trying to do is it doesn't have to be really expensive. There doesn't have to be some huge cost in order to be able to achieve these things. There are microphones that are not that expensive. There is open source. I taught my students both at Cornell, and Ryan taught the students at Bard how to use an open source recording and audio and video recording editing software.
It also doesn't have to be crappy.
Yeah.
You can do both. It is possible now. I mean, I think especially now, the cost of recording equipment and cameras and all this stuff, it's really just dropping because everything is miniaturizing such that there's kind of no excuse for a company to not build you a decent preamp, because you can get it all in a chip and it's good and the distortion is low and the noise is low. There's like no excuse except to just rip people off. So now I think companies are actually making decent stuff that you could get for $200 or $300 and really be okay. And there's free software out there where you can do excellent work. It doesn't have to be crappy. And you just have to sort of know where to
invest
look.
$10,000 into a setup. Like
you could if you want.
Well, one could. But, I mean, we certainly have it. Yeah. We're still crappy.
Well, I mean, you think about like your favorite recording from the 1950s. That technology that they use is like nothing compared to what is available for, like you said, the simple price of like $200 to $300. Yeah. And you can still achieve something actually very, quality without having to break the bank. Lord knows, for most of us, we don't have that kind of money.
No.
We certainly do not. And as educators, we can also show them shows for that. That's what you would pay for. It's probably not even what you would pay for one recording session with somebody. Yeah. And so if you have the control to, you pay that money once and then you get to keep using that technology, but then you get to be the one saying like, oh, I want to shoot from this angle. Oh, I want to cut in with this thing here.
And so long as you know
I like it when these mics are turned out just a little more and I'll move them over here, and you start to make these decisions and be like, wow, that's my sound. And it's part of me, but also outside of me, and it's all just aesthetic beauty.
And just so long decisions. As you take care of the chords.
That's right. You got to take care of those goddamn chords because they will hurt you. They will get you when you least expect it. So
okay, listen.
Remember,
I'm gonna keep you on after air so I can show you my poor chords, which I spent a lot. They're copper. They were Japanese. And they're just, they're flailing.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Okay.
So the sound doctor will address Abe after the show.
But we'll use this as a good lesson.
Fine. Whatever it is.
We'll use this as a good lesson to folks.
That's right.
This is the PSA for your chords. Always wind your chords.
That's right.
But not like this. You will break them.
Listen, I just leave them plugged in.
That's it. It just leave things plugged in and it's fine.
Oh, okay. Well, you hear.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay,
that's good. It's only when you unplug them and take them places you want to do it the right way. But if you just leave them there, they're happy.
They're plugged
like
in.
Fish,
they're just right here.
But you don't have to feed them.
Self-sustaining chords, folks.
All right. Well, I'm glad we had you on the show just to confirm that my chords are okay.
Yeah, but I do hope that when we come out of this, we come out of it with, some of the stuff that I've gotten to do remotely, I never would have gotten to do things like this in person. I was in residence at Yellow Barn this summer for a short 3-week period. And one of the pieces that I got to perform is this beautiful work for soprano, clarinet, and string quartet by Osvaldo Golioff called Tenebrae. And we performed this piece out in the at night under the stars with the crickets chirping, and I never would have done that. And it completely changed the piece for me. So even if the next time I perform that work, it is in a beautiful concert hall with excellent acoustics where I'm not freezing, I will still hear those crickets and feel that moonlight and the starshine, and that will become a part of that experience for me. And I am so grateful for things like that. And if we can just take that with us when we are able to be in person, that creativity, that resourcefulness, that curiosity, I think we will be ready for what's next.
I agree. I think that this has been an incubator for a chance for people to either develop imagination or to really use their imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. It is just an hour's flown by, and we will have to have you back on again.
I can't believe that. It feels like
I know.
Because we haven't even had a chance to dig in. But this is our time when I play our outro music, which you may recognize as some Schubert. And we give shout outs. We just have fun. Okay, here we go. Happy New Year, Richard. Thank you.
Happy New Year, Abe. This
Happy
has
New
been
Year,
a great experience.
Lucy, Ryan, you guys.
I'm gonna do a shout out to Rosie because Ryan got her approval.
Oh, I want to shout out to their dog. Is that
Rudy?
Is the dog? Is Rudy still with us?
Rudy is no longer, but I think they are on Rudy 4.
Oh, okay.
It's a good line.
I'm not sure, but they are all Rudy.
Do they ever go Rudy and do a slow clap? Remember the movie Rudy?
Only when they're at Notre Dame.
Visiting Susan. Happy New Year, Susan Ewens. Good night.